500 rainbow trout bobbing lifeless, bellies turned skyward, across my once pristine lake. The sour rut slammed into me like a body blow as I took in the destruction of everything I'd built. My name's Ezra Blackwood, a disabled Army veteran who poured 5 years of sweat, pain, and patience into creating a sustainable trout farm on my grandfather's Montana land. At exactly 7 a.m., Delilah Thornfield, HOA president, sauntered down my dock with a steaming mug of coffee, a smug grin plastered on her face as she surveyed the floating death. Well, she sneered at last. Maybe now you'll shut down this disgusting fish operation. She dumped 40 pounds of copper sulfate into my lake at 2 a.m. environmental sabotage against a disabled veteran, all because she couldn't stand seeing people fish within sight of a precious view. You have no idea what you've just done, I told her quietly. She laughed. I solve a neighborhood problem. What this suburban psychopath didn't realize was that a little victory would unravel her life in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. Some lessons leave a very bitter aftertaste. What would you do if your HOA Karen destroyed your dreams? Drop an A and tell me where you're watching from. Let me rewind and explain how the suburban psychopath declared war on a disabled veteran and accidentally engineered her own downfall. I'm Ezra Blackwood, former Army engineer turned fish farmer. 5 years ago, an IED in Afghanistan tore through my left leg and ended my 20-year military career in seconds. The VA disability check barely covered rent, much less the medical bills that followed me home like scavengers. That's when I inherited Grandpa's 200-acre Montana ranch, complete with a 40-acre lake so clear you could watch trout glide 20 feet below the surface. Clearwater Lake sat 300 feet above the valley floor, fed by mountain springs flowing nonstop since the Ice Age. The morning mist drifting off the water smelled like liquid silver mixed with pine needles. Most people would have just fished for fun. I saw survival. 2 years studying aquaculture. 1 year buried in permits. 2 more constructing floating pens. By year 5, I had $180,000 worth of breeding stock and was finally profitable. The sound of trout breaking the surface at dawn beat any alarm clock I'd ever owned. Then the California invasion arrived. Willowbrook Estates, 47 McMansions sprouting like luxury tumors on the Tatum family's old cattle ranch. Each house price between $800,000 and $1. $2 million. Enough money to bulldoze 200 acres of real nature, then write rules about preserving rural charm. Here's what none of those transplants understood. Their polished subdivisions sat directly downstream from my land. Those same mountain springs feeding my lake flowed underground through limestone caverns, resurfacing as the aquifer that supplied Willowbrook's private wells. Every drop of their drinking water started in Clearwater Lake. The Geological Survey proving this lay buried in county archives, never shared with residents. They had no clue their morning coffee came from the same springs that kept my trout alive. Enter Delilah Thornfield, self-appointed ruler of Willowbrook and my future nemesis. Picture a 58-year-old corporate compliance officer who spent 30 years in San Francisco discovering genuine joy in citing violations. When she moved to Montana, she brought that same energy to suburban warfare. Her voice could cut glass, and often did during HOA meetings, where the background soundtrack was neighbors grinding their teeth. Here's the irony. Delilah had been rejected 3 times by the exclusive Bitterroot Angling Club. Too aggressive, they said. 0 respect for fishing etiquette. So when my operation began attracting happy customers, it triggered something feral in her control-obsessed brain. The community fractured fast. Old-school ranchers like Tom and Sarah Tatum backed me. They understood working land to survive. The new money crowd saw my lake as a stain on their manufactured paradise. Things escalated when Billy Redstone, a local fishing guide, started bringing clients to my lake. Nothing wild. Maybe 15 people on busy days, but enough to send Delilah into full meltdown mode. Her first strike came on a Tuesday morning that began peacefully enough. I was feeding trout, watching them rise like silver coins in the sunlight when gravel crunched beneath expensive heels. Mr. Blackwood, your fishing circus ends today. Delilah stood at my property line in a power suit worth more than my monthly disability check, gripping a manila folder like a loaded weapon. Diesel fumes from her idling BMW blended with a clean lake air, pollution invading paradise. Morning, I said, continue my routine. Don't be cute. She snapped open the folder with surgical precision. Your commercial operation violates Covenant 4, 7b. All fishing activities must cease immediately. You will also install an 8-foot privacy fence along the entire shoreline. Estimated cost, $47,000. The morning this suddenly felt glacial. This is my property. Your covenants don't apply here. Her smile could have flash-frozen the lake. Watch me prove you wrong. Soldier boy, you have 30 days or we bury you in injunctions, zoning complaints, and nuisance lawsuits. She slapped a violation notice into my hand, the paper crackling in the mountain breeze like dead leaves. Some of us understand property values, Mr. Blackwood. Your little hobby is costing us real money. What the suburban terrorist failed to grasp was that her crusade to eliminate fishing would soon poison the very water flowing from her kitchen tap. Sometimes karma travels underground. Delilah wasn't bluffing. Within 48 hours, my mailbox overflowed like a legal landfill, county zoning complaints, environmental violation reports, business license challenges, everything short of accusing my coffee maker of disturbing the peace. The papers rustled in the autumn wind, each stamp seal translating directly into legal fees. Then came the surprise inspection. County Inspector Jake Morrison arrived Thursday morning while I was checking aeration systems. I'd learned from other fish farmers that hostile inspectors could shut you down for months, even when you're fully compliant. One guy in Missoula once got cited for insufficient fish happiness documentation. Apparently, that's real. Jake stepped out of his truck, looking like he'd rather be auditing sewage. Clipboard ready, skepticism armed. The smell of wood smoke from my cabin collided with diesel exhaust, industry-meeting wilderness. Mr. Blackwood, we've received complaints about unauthorized commercial fishing. My stomach sank until I noticed a Marine Corps tattoo peeking from under his sleeve. Semper Fi, I said, extending my hand. His entire posture changed instantly. What unit? Army engineer, but brothers all the same. Jake laughed, the sound echoing across the water and spooking a great blue heron into flight. Damn right. Let me guess. HOA princess with too much time? He'd seen it before. Wealthy newcomers weaponizing bureaucracy against locals who actually work for a living. He called it harassment radar, and Delilah had set it off like a Christmas tree. We talked shop while he inspected everything. My permits were flawless because disabled veterans don't get second chances. Jake tested water quality, checked fish health, even counted aeration bubbles. Everything passed. This is impressive, he said. Most places miss something. You're running this like NASA built a fish farm. Steam curl for my thermos. Couldn't afford mistakes. Well, whoever filed this complaint is about to be disappointed. Jake explained that when inspectors document harassment by the complainant, it creates a legal paper trail. 3 days later, his report hit both mailboxes. It didn't just clear me, it shredded Delilah's credibility. The assessment praised my environmental stewardship and noted the complaints appeared motivated by personal animus rather than regulation. Somewhere, across 3 counties, Delilah's sanity snapped. She escalated, filing state-level groundwater contamination claims. Total fiction, but enough to trigger more paperwork. Then came her masterstroke of suburban terrorism. Tuesday morning, I was replacing a feeding timer when engines rumbled up my drive. 3 black SUVs rolled in like a DEA raid, unloading 6 tactical-looking goons who screamed, "Fail Police Academy." "Sir, step away from the water." Their leader barked through a bullhorn that could wake fish in Canada. Adrenaline coated my tongue as Delilah emerged from the lead SUV, clipboard clutched tight, eyes shining with malicious joy. She'd hired private security to intimidate a disabled veteran off his own land. "Gentlemen," she announced, "document all fishing equipment. Mr. Blackwood needs education on compliance." Boots crunched across my gravel like an occupying force. One tried taking water samples until I reminded him that would be theft. "You're trespassing," I said calmly. "We are conducting a lawful investigation," she purred. Time for my countermove. I called Jake Morrison and put him on speaker. 2. "Jake, remember that harassment complaint?" I said into my phone. "I've got 6 private contractors photographing my legal operation, while my HOA president plays dress-up general." 30 minutes later, Jake rolled in with 2 sheriff's deputies. Real law enforcement informing fake law enforcement that they could pack up immediately or enjoy matching trespassing charges. Delilah's high-priced intimidation crew scattered faster than French cavalry. Her expression shifted from smug satisfaction to outright rage as a tactical fantasy dissolved. "This isn't over," she hissed. "No," I replied evenly. "But next time, maybe hire people who understand property law." The failed security stunt didn't humble Delilah. It made her more dangerous. Like a rattlesnake backed into a corner, she got creative and twice as poisonous. 2 weeks later, Billy Redstone called, panic cracking his voice. "Ezra, they are blocking the county road. Put up signs. Hire guards. Turning my client away like we're storming Fort Knox." I drove down and found Delilah's latest masterpiece. Private property, no trespassing signs lined a public easement providing legal access to Clearwater Lake. 2 guards in matching polo shirts man a portable booth, bouncing confused families like nightclub rejects. A diesel generator hummed beside them, its fumes blending with idling cars and parental frustration into a toxic fog of bureaucratic stupidity. Kids pressed faces to windows, fishing rods untouched, while Derek, the head guard, whose neck was thicker than most people's waists, studied a clipboard like it held nuclear launch codes. "Excuse me," I said, stepping into his kingdom. "This is a county easement. You can't block public access." Derek squinted, gears grinding. "It says whole area private now. HOA business." Here's what most people don't realize. Blocking public easement becomes a federal crime when it interferes with interstate commerce. Billy's guide service brought clients from 3 states, making Delilah's blockade a Commerce Clause violation. Not that Derek would grasp constitutional law if it slapped him across his oversized backside, but Delilah's real nuclear option arrived 3 days later, taped to my door like a formal declaration of war. A nuisance lawsuit demanding immediate shutdown of all fishing, plus $50,000 in damages for diminished property values and community disruption. 23 pages of legal fantasy claiming my 15-person daily operation equaled hosting a motorcycle rally inside a retirement home. The papers whispered in the mountain wind like threats. Each paragraph further detached from reality than the last. The tactic was textbook wealthy warfare, weaponized court against someone who can't afford to bleed money for months. Even winning costs you and lawsuits are frivolous. She was betting my disability income would buckle. That's when fate delivered an unexpected ally. Emma Vasquez, reporter for the Bitterroot Valley News, had been digging into rural gentrification conflicts. But she wasn't just another journalist. She was a former military spouse whose ex-husband had battled similar post-service business harassment. When she heard about armed guard blocking public fishing access, it lit something personal. She showed up Saturday morning with a photographer, timing that felt suspiciously perfect. Later I learned she'd been monitoring police scanners and knew exactly when confrontations were likely. The money shot practically staged itself. Derek turning away a disabled veteran trying to take his grandson fishing. The kid couldn't have been older than 8, gripping a toy-sized rod and wearing a future Marine shirt that punched you right in the chest. "Sir, access denied," Derek declared, proud as a man finally entrusted with authority. "But Grandpa promised we'd catch trout," the boy said. The disappointment cut across the parking lot like a blade. Emma's photographer captured American injustice in a single frame, powerful people denying children access to public land. The real explosion came when Delilah arrived to personally oversee her blockade. Emma's opening question proved she'd done her homework. "Mrs. Thornfield, given your background in regulatory compliance in San Francisco, you understand blocking public easements violates federal interstate commerce law, correct?" Delilah's polished media smile froze, like someone had just explained quantum physics using interpretive dance. She'd expected soft questions about safety, not constitutional law, from a reporter who came prepared. "We're protecting our community from environmental damage," Delilah stammered. "Environmental damage." Emma countered. "Mr. Blackwood's operation holds EPA certification for sustainable practices. Permits can be revoked," Delilah muttered, sweat beading despite the cool October air. Emma dismantled her position piece by piece. Targeting of a disabled veteran, illegal restriction of public access. You could watch Delilah realize she'd walked straight into a journalistic ambush disguised as a friendly interview. The article dropped Tuesday and detonated. HOA illegally blocks disabled veterans' business, restricts public land access. Emma framed it perfectly. David versus Goliath, military service, documented harassment, photos of families turned away by hive muscle. Social media lit up like a dry forest in August. Veterans groups shared it from Billings to Bozeman. Within 48 hours, the county attorney, already watching HOA overreach in wealthy developments, ordered Delilah to dismantle the blockade or face federal charges. Derek's boo vanished faster than dignity at a reality TV reunion. As her rented authority figures packed up, Delilah stood frozen, staring like someone who just learned her winning lottery ticket was printed in invisible ink. "This isn't over," she snarled. "Keep digging," I replied. "Eventually you'll hit oil or hell." What followed proved public humiliation had snapped Delilah's last functioning brain cell. Her image collapsed. Social media showed no mercy. Memes of her blocking children, comparisons to cartoon villains, veterans organizing boycotts of anything tied to Willowbrook Estates. Her LinkedIn went from community leader to punchline overnight. Most people would retreat. Delilah escalated. The warning came from an unlikely source. Margaret Wu, HOA treasurer, called Tuesday evening, her voice crackling like static before a storm. "Mr. Blackwood, you need to know something. Delilah just approved emergency spending for algae treatment chemicals. She says your lake is contaminating groundwater." My blood went ice cold. Every aquaculture operator knows poisoning horror stories, usually antifreezing grudges, but this felt calculated. "What chemicals?" I asked. "Copper sulfate, 40 pounds. The words hit like concrete. Small doses control algae. Large doses commit aquatic genocide. 40 pounds could sterilize a lake while leaving it deceptively clear. The perfect crime for someone who didn't understand ecosystems. I'd seen online forums where angry neighbors discuss solutions. Same advice every time. Copper sulfate leaves little evidence. Kills quietly, blamed on algae blooms. Delilah had done her research. I spent 3 sleepless nights on patrol, motion cameras, irregular routines, windows cracked to catch unfamiliar sounds. October carried every noise. Owl calls, beaver tail slaps, distant semis on Highway 93. She struck under new moon. Absolute darkness. 2:17 a.m. Tuesday. A wildlife camera meant for beavers captured a felony instead. I woke Wednesday to environmental apocalypse. The smell came first. Industrial accident mixed with rotting seafood, thick enough to taste. Then the sight. Hundreds of rainbow trout floating belly up across Clearwater Lake, like silver coins tossed into poison. My $180,000 breeding stock. 5 years erased. The shock felt like shrapnel all over again, that numb moment when your brain can't process loss. These fish weren't inventory. They were proof a broken veteran could still build something real. Billy arrived within minutes, photographing evidence. His camera clicked like Morse code in the morning silence while dead fish tapped the shore with each wave. "This isn't natural," he said quietly. "Someone murdered your lake." Wildlife Officer Rebecca Torres arrived 2 hours later with testing gear straight out of CSI. Copper sulfate levels were off the charts, enough to kill fish in a lake 10 times Clearwater size. "Massive chemical overdose," she confirmed. "Whoever did this used enough copper sulfate to sterilize a small reservoir." 3. While Rebecca gathered samples, I checked my wildlife camera, expecting nothing useful. Instead, I found crystal-clear footage of a figure in a kayak methodically poisoning my lake. The video was airtight. Someone dressed in dark clothing moving with calm precision, gliding across the water and dumping heavy bags of chemicals with practiced confidence. The timestamp read 2:17 a.m. The vehicle's license plate was barely visible, but clear enough for digital enhancement. And here's where Delilah's corporate instincts failed her. She'd paid for the chemicals using the HOA credit card, leaving a paper trail so obvious even a mole cop could follow it. The agricultural supply store had security footage of a 58-year-old woman purchasing 40 pounds of copper sulfate while claiming it was for emergency pond maintenance. "She's about as subtle as a brick through a window," Rebecca muttered as she reviewed the evidence. Rebecca's investigation uncovered something even I hadn't fully understood. Clearwater Lake's underground springs didn't stop at my property line. They traveled through limestone cave systems, eventually resurfacing as the aquifer feeding Willowbrook Estate's private wells. Geological surveys showed the water took 6 to 8 weeks to move from my lake to their kitchen taps. Delilah had poisoned her own drinking water. Emma Vasquez arrived by noon, drawn in by emergency radio traffic. Her photographer documented the ecological devastation in brutal detail while I stood on the dock, staring at the remains of everything I'd built. "This crosses every line," Emma said during her interview with Rebecca. "Property disputes don't usually escalate into environmental terrorism." By evening, the story detonated statewide. HOA president commits environmental terrorism dominated headlines. Delilah's corporate headshot plastered beside images of my poisoned lake. As sunset painted the contaminated water blood red and dead fish drifted like accusations, something inside me shifted. This wasn't about fishing anymore. It was about justice. And karma was already moving downstream. Emma called Friday morning, excitement buzzing through her voice like electricity before a lightning strike. "Ezra, I've been digging into Willowbrook's water system for the follow-up. You need to see this." She arrived 30 minutes later with a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse, and Dr. Amanda Foster, a hydrogeologist from the University of Montana who looked deeply unhappy about explaining water tables to journalists. "Show him the geological survey," Emma said, spreading county records across my kitchen table. Dr. Foster pointed to a detailed cross-section straight out of a geology textbook. "This is actually fascinating. Clearwater Lake sits in a rare limestone formation. See these channels? The diagram showed my lake feeding an underground cave network that snaked for miles before surfacing at springs connected to Willowbrook's wells. Little arrows trace water flow from Clearwater Lake straight into their private system. My coffee froze halfway to my mouth. You're saying my lake supplies their drinking water?" Dr. Foster nodded. "Every drop. The journey takes about 6 weeks." The irony hit like a freight train hauling cosmic justice. Emma's smile could have powered the entire valley. She poisoned her own water and doesn't even know it. Dr. Foster pulled out a calculator. Copper sulfate doesn't degrade easily underground. It binds to limestone, creating slow-release contamination that can last months. Based on dosage and flow rates, dangerous levels should reach their wells in roughly 6 weeks. 6 weeks. 4 to 7 households drinking the same poison Delilah used to murder my fish. The EPA's safe drinking limit for copper is 3 parts per million. My lake tested at 4 to 7 parts per million immediately after the poisoning. What happens when people drink copper-contaminated water? I asked, already dreading the answer. Nausea, vomiting, diarrhea at first. Dr. Foster said clinically. Long-term exposure causes liver damage, kidney failure, neurological issues. Children and the elderly are especially vulnerable. Emma's pen scratched nonstop. The original geological survey had been filed with the county but never shared with Willowbrook residents. They had no idea where their water came from. Here's what most people don't know about private wells. No routine monitoring, no oversight, no early warning system. Contamination is usually discovered only after people start getting sick. Dr. Foster showed lab results from Willowbrook's main distribution point, currently clean. Then the projections. Week 1, undetectable. Week 3, approaching concern. Week 6, dangerous. Week 8, potentially toxic. I stared at the timeline like it was a countdown to poetic justice. Delilah had planted a biological time bomb beneath her own neighborhood. "There's more," Emma said, sliding over another document. Property records show Delilah and Marcus personally guaranteed the HOA's construction loans. Environmental cleanup would trigger personal liability clauses. They could lose everything. The scale of Delilah's self-destruction was staggering. Environmental terrorism, poisoned drinking water, financial ruin, all to eliminate my fishing operation. So what do we do? Emma asked. "Warn them," I said instinctively, then looked out at my poisoned lake. These were the same people who cheered Delilah's harassment, celebrated my shutdown, applauded illegal blockades. But kids lived there, elderly residents, innocent people who trusted their HOA president. "We document everything first," I said finally. "Build an A-type case. Then give them a choice, accountability or consequences." Dr. Foster nodded. "Science and justice. I'm in." The clock was ticking. 6 weeks until copper reached Delilah's tap. Time to plan the reveal. The next 2 weeks felt like preparing for the most important mission of my life. Military instincts took over: objective, timeline, contingencies. Except this time, I wasn't neutralizing enemy positions. I was engineering public exposure. My workshop became mission control. Cave maps on every wall. Flow charts above my bench. A countdown calendar marking contamination milestones. The smell of sawdust and machine oil filled the air as I built Operation Clearwater. The centerpiece was devastatingly simple: 2 identical 50-gallon aquarium tanks. Tank 1, clean spring water with healthy trout swimming freely. Tank 2, Willowbrook well water, spiked with the same copper concentration soon reaching their taps. Dr. Foster helped calculate dosage. 15 parts per million, she said. High enough to kill fish quickly. Low enough to accurately reflect what they'll drink in 4 weeks. Live fish dying in real time, while I explained that the water came from their own wells. No jargon, no charts, just truth. Emma coordinated media with campaign-level precision, local TV, environmental reporters, even a documentary crew tracking rural gentrification. The HOA's annual meeting was perfect. Mandatory attendance. Transparency bylaws allowed outside observers. The key is sequencing, Emma said over coffee that tasted like pure alertness. Start with a crime. Build the irony. End with personal consequences. By the time Delilah realized what was happening, she'd be trapped in front of 200 witnesses. Billy Redstone mobilized the veteran community with Pentagon-level efficiency. VFW halls. American Legion posts. Networks of men who understood what it meant when civilians attacked one of their own. They'd ensure Delilah couldn't dismiss this as a personal feud. Here's what most people don't know about environmental law. When contamination crosses property lines, federal jurisdiction kicks in under the Clean Water Act. Rebecca Torres had already looped in EPA Inspector Thomas Reed, who was assembling a case that could designate the entire area as a Superfund site. 4. Property values would nosedive, insurance carriers would pull coverage, and remediation expenses could spiral into the millions. The EPA does not play games with deliberate contamination, Reed said during a site inspection that felt less like a visit and more like a tactical briefing. We're talking criminal indictments, massive civil fines, and personal liability that could financially destroy everyone involved. The legal approach was beautifully simple. Delilah's actions had created a ticking disaster that would obliterate the very neighborhood she claimed to lead. We only needed to present 2 options: immediate confession with full cooperation, or public exposure followed by federal prosecution. Either path ended the same way: accountability. Janet Powell, the retired school teacher who had openly questioned Delilah's authority, became our inside connection. She'd quietly been organizing HOA members exhausted by Delilah's iron-fisted rule. Margaret Wu uncovered financial records revealing questionable expenses and unauthorized transactions. Even Marcus, Delilah's own husband, was starting to crack under pressure. His drinking non-stop, Janet reported during one of our strategy sessions, rambling about attorneys and disappearing to Mexico. I think the guilt is tearing him apart. The timing couldn't have been better. 4 weeks until contamination reached dangerous levels. 3 weeks until the annual meeting. 2 weeks until vulnerable residents might start showing symptoms. We would expose everything precisely when denial became impossible. I spent nights testing presentation gear, rehearsing contingencies, preparing for every interruption imaginable. The portable water testing unit borrowed from a university could process samples live, projecting results onto a massive screen that would make denial scientifically impossible. Dr. Foster trained me to explain hydrogeology in terms furious homeowners could grasp. Picture a straw, she said. The lake is poison, the caves are the straw, and their wells are their mouths. Simple, visual, horrifying. Meanwhile, the community center was booked under the excuse of Delilah's major environmental announcement. She believed, standing before her community, about to learn that her vendetta against my fishing operation had poisoned the very people she claimed to protect. The clock hit T-3 weeks. Time to spring the trap. 3 weeks before the annual meeting, Delilah's desperation escalated to levels that would impress a cornered badger with trust issues. The federal investigation had her rattled. EPA vehicles parked around town aren't subtle, and Rebecca Torres' daily sampling visits drew exactly the kind of attention that makes guilty people sweat through luxury deodorant. Her first panic move came Tuesday night, when my motion sensors lit up like a strobe at a rave. From the security monitors, I watched a shadowy figure creep toward my workshop. Infrared cameras removed any mystery. Delilah Thornfield, former corporate executive, current suburban criminal, attempting burglary with the finesse of a drunk rhinoceros in a gift shop. She was after the wildlife camera footage that captured her midnight poisoning spree. Her heavy breathing came through the audio feed, sharp gasps mixed with something disturbingly close to sobbing. Corporate compliance seminars apparently skip breaking and entering modules. The floodlights triggered automatically, bathing her in illumination bright enough to guide commercial aircraft. Her face, recorded in high-definition clarity, showed pure terror blended with a kind of rage that makes people text their ex at 2 a.m. She bolted faster than a taxpayer fleeing an IRS audit, abandoning a crowbar that later provided pristine fingerprints for Rebecca's evidence file. Mini twist. What Delilah didn't realize was that my security system automatically uploads footage to the cloud. Even if she'd succeeded, it would have been useless. The attempted break-in earned her a formal visit from county deputies, but her true masterpiece of stupidity came the following week. Marcus was unraveling like bargain yarn in a washing machine. His drinking escalated from coping mechanism to clinical emergency, and he started unloading guilt-soaked confessions on anyone within range. The man couldn't keep a secret if his survival depended on it, which, ironically, it now did. That's when Delilah decided to fix a federal nightmare using the ancient technique of bribery. Rebecca Torres called me Thursday morning, her voice blending professional fury with disbelief. "You won't believe this. Delilah tried to buy me." The details were almost cartoonish. Delilah approached Rebecca at Mountain Ground Coffee, sliding an envelope across the table like a spy thriller, except she was attempting to corrupt a federal officer in full view of security cameras. $25,000 in cash, Rebecca said, clearly enjoying her evidentiary jackpot, plus future consulting opportunities as she blamed your fish farm for the contamination. The cafe's cameras caught everything: Delilah's darting eyes, the envelope handoff, Rebecca's perfectly neutral expression while documenting a felony in real time. The audio was even better. Delilah actually used phrases like mutually beneficial arrangement and unfortunate misunderstanding, apparently convinced she was in a crime drama instead of constructing her own legal coffin. Here's what most people don't know. Bribing a federal officer carries a mandatory minimum 5-year sentence, and prosecutors treat recorded attempts like Christmas morning. Rebecca's body cam captured every word, every gesture, every nervous bead of sweat. FBI agent Patricia Hawkins arrived from Missler within hours, treating the bribery attempt like an early birthday gift. Federal white-collar prosecutors fantasize about cases this clean. Video evidence, multiple witnesses, a suspect reckless enough to commit crimes on camera. The community began fracturing like a cracker-built dam under pressure. Margaret Wu uncovered that Delilah had siphoned $47,000 from HOA funds to cover legal expenses. Janet Powell's resistance group surged, demanding emergency sessions to oust their criminal president. Even loyalists were backing away faster than people fleeing a gas leak. Marcus's mental collapse accelerated like a runaway locomotive. He began day drinking at the community pool, trapping neighbors with rambling confessions about environmental lawyers and federal prison meals. The metallic scent of fear blended with chlorine and despair, thick enough to choke on. Dr. Foster's test showed copper levels steadily rising through the cave system. 15 days until dangerous concentrations. 10 days until the annual meeting. 5 days until sensitive residents might show symptoms. The timeline tightened like a hangman's knot around Delilah's neck. Her last act of panic came Sunday evening, attempting to drain the family's entire savings. Bank security flags triggered when she tried withdrawing $89,000 in cash for immediate travel. Federal bail conditions prevented her from leaving the county, but desperation rarely produces logic. Standing in my workshop, surrounded by evidence binders and countdown calendars, I felt the quiet satisfaction of watching justice advance with mathematical certainty. 9 days until the annual meeting. 9 days until Delilah answered for poisoning her own water supply. The trap was locked. The proof was airtight. Final act approaching. 8 days before the annual meeting, Delilah made one last attempt to control the narrative, and it collapsed so spectacularly that even her attorney probably reconsidered their career path. With federal charges looming and her support evaporating, she hired Dr. Gerald Stackhaze, an environmental consultant whose resume read like a highlight reel of corporate denial. His specialty was testifying that obvious pollution was natural variance, usually on behalf of companies dodging EPA penalties. At $500 an hour, Stackhaze looked exactly as expected. Slick back hair, expensive suit failing to conceal an oily demeanor, and a smile that made ethical people pat their pockets. His plan was straightforward. Claim the copper contamination occurred naturally. Argue my fish farm was inherently dangerous. Paint Delilah as a concerned citizen protecting her neighbors from a reckless veteran's negligence. It might have worked if Marcus hadn't completely imploded at the worst possible moment. Tuesday afternoon, while Dr. Stackhaze prepared a rehearsal at the community center, Marcus staggered and drunk enough to float a destroyer. The reek of bourbon and despair filled the room as he interrupted with a confession worthy of a confessional booth. "Stop lying for her," Marcus yelled, swaying like a palm tree in a hurricane. "She poisoned the lake. I drove the car. We dumped 40 pounds of copper sulfate at 2 in the morning because she hates fishing." The silence afterward was so dense it could have been shrink-wrapped. Dr. Stackhouse's laptop still displayed its opening slide, natural copper occurrence in Montana limestone formations. The irony was almost painful. Mini twist. What no one realized was that Janet Powell had secretly recorded HOA meeting for months, documenting Delilah's tyrannical behavior. Marcus's entire confession in pristine audio. Margaret Wu dropped her pen like it was radioactive. 3 other board members exchanged looks conveying entire conversations about criminal exposure, liability, and whether homeowners' insurance covered accessories after fact. Dr. Stackhaze attempted corporate damage control, the kind that works in boardrooms, not packed community centers. 5. Obviously, Mr. Thornfield is under extreme stress. Stress. Marcus let out a laugh sharp enough to cut glass, the kind of laugh you hear from someone who's just realized crime doesn't come with a pension plan. Stress? I'm facing federal charges. Gerald. We poison our own drinking water just to stop people from fishing. How's that for stress? Delilah arrived 20 minutes later to find her meticulously choreographed defense in shambles and her husband handing out unsolicited confessions like free samples at Costco. Her face cycled through more expressions than a mime mid-breakdown. Shock, fury, panic, and finally the empty stare of someone watching years of manipulation collapse like a card house in a hurricane. "Marcus, shut up," she snapped, but the damage was already spreading like spilled coffee across irreplaceable paperwork. Janet Powell's recording hit social media within hours. The audio of Marcus openly admitting to environmental terrorism, while Delilah's overpriced expert sat frozen in the background, became the most shared piece of media in Bitterroot Valley history. Local news ran it on repeat. Environmental organizations pushed it nationwide. Late-night comedy shows couldn't resist the story of an HOA president who poisoned herself trying to ban fishing. Any remaining support for Delilah evaporated faster than rain in the desert. Residents who once defended her authoritarian leadership suddenly developed urgent errands whenever she appeared. The Willowbrook Estates Facebook group transformed into a digital firing squad demanding her immediate resignation. Dr. Stackhaze bailed faster than a vampire at sunrise, citing irreconcilable differences, and allegedly left her with one piece of advice: plead guilty and hope for a federal prison with a decent library. Meanwhile, Dr. Foster's test showed copper levels edging dangerously high through the cave system. We were 6 days from the annual meeting, 4 days from potential health impacts, and watching Delilah's universe implode in real time like a precision demolition. Panic hung over Willowbrook Estates like a physical fog. You could taste the desperation, metallic, biting, mixed with a scorched scent of burned bridges and ruined reputations. Rebecca Torres fielded interview requests from 3 separate news outlets, all asking about environmental terrorism. The FBI added conspiracy charges based on Marcus's recorded confession. The county attorney stacked on attempted bribery and evidence tampering. Standing on my dock, watching the sun sink over water finally beginning to clear as copper settled into sediment, I felt the calm certainty of justice moving with the inevitability of gravity. 5 days until the annual meeting. 5 days until Delilah learned that poisoning your own well is the textbook definition of playing stupid games and winning catastrophic prizes. The endgame had arrived. The Willowbrook Estates Community Center had never seen anything like it. 200 people crammed into a room designed for 50, news cameras forming a forest of tripods as reporters treated it like the environmental crime story of the decade. I arrived early with my dual aquarium setup, watching Dr. Foster calibrate equipment that looked borrowed from a space program. The air smelled of nervous sweat and overheated electronics. Tank 1 held crystal-clear spring water with 6 healthy rainbow trout gliding effortlessly. Tank 2 contained water from Willowbrook's wells, dosed to match the copper concentration they'd be drinking in 72 hours. The message was unavoidable: life versus death, separated by identical glass walls. Delilah entered at exactly 10 a.m., flanked by a lawyer who looked like he'd rather defend serial killers than environmental terrorists. Her power suit couldn't conceal the hollow desperation of someone who'd spent a week watching her empire collapse. Marcus wasn't with her. He was already in federal custody after violating bail by trying to flee to Canada. The crowd reacted instantly. Hostility rippled through the room. Residents who trusted her for 3 years now faced health risks, collapsing property values, and cleanup costs that could bankrupt the community. The low roar of 200 furious whispers sounded like a kicked hornet's nest. Emma Vasquez had positioned cameras perfectly. Local stations, regional outlets, even environmental filmmakers who'd driven in from Seattle to document what prosecutors were calling Montana's worst intentional water contamination case. I stepped to the microphone as silence dropped like a guillotine. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ezra Blackwood. 3 weeks ago, someone poisoned my lake with 40 pounds of copper sulfate, killing $180,000 worth of fish overnight. Every eye locked in. Dr. Foster brought up geological cross-sections showing the underground cave network linking Clearwater Lake to Willowbrook's wells. Here's what the person responsible didn't know. I continued, watching Delilah's face drain as comprehension hit. Your drinking water comes from the same lake she poisoned. The reaction was explosive. Gasps, shouts, parents clutching children as if the water were already lethal. Someone screamed, "Oh my God, we've been drinking poison." Phones flew out as people called doctors, lawyers, anyone. Dr. Foster's explanation was devastatingly simple. Flow patterns, timelines, copper concentration graphs showing danger approaching in days, not months. The individual who poisoned Mr. Blackwood's fish, she said evenly, effectively poisoned your entire water supply. Peak toxicity will occur in approximately 72 hours. That's when I revealed a live demonstration. This is your water, I said, pointing to Tank 2. The same concentration you'll be drinking by Thursday. I added 6 healthy trout. They showed distress immediately, erratic movements, gasping, classic copper poisoning. Within minutes, the first fish floated belly up, a silver indictment in toxic water. No charts needed, no jargon required, just living proof dying in real time. The crowd's rage snapped into focus on Delilah. 200 people realized she committed environmental terrorism against her own neighbors. How could you do this to us? Janet Powell shouted, her teacher's voice slicing through the chaos. You poisoned our children. FBI agent Patricia Hawkins stepped forward as Delilah tried to slip away. Delilah Thornfield, you are under arrest for environmental terrorism, conspiracy, bribery of federal officers, and reckless endangerment of public health. The cuffs clicked shut, loud as a final chapter closing. Cameras caught everything as agents escorted away the woman who destroyed her own community's water supply trying to destroy a disabled veteran's fishing operation. But the moment that sealed it came when I placed a glass of water from Tank 2 in front of her. Mrs. Thornfield, I said calmly, my voice filling the room, since you believe this water is safe for your neighbor's children, would you like a drink? The glass sat untouched, copper-laced water identical to what would pour from her faucet in 3 days. Every eye stayed on her as she stared at the poison she created. She couldn't speak, couldn't move, just stood there while cameras and witnesses captured the instant she understood the full weight of her ruin. That's what I thought, I said softly. MIC dropped complete. Justice delivered with scientific precision and public witness. 18 months later, Clearwater Lake glittered under the Montana sun, cleaner than before Delilah's attack. Sometimes destruction clears space for renewal. The aftermath was chaos, but the kind that forges stronger communities. FEMA water trucks arrived within hours, turning Willowbrook into a temporary relief zone. Neighbors who barely exchanged hellos organized schedules, shared supplies, and learned that surviving crisis together build bonds deeper than property lines. Delilah received 7 years in federal prison and $8 million in restitution. Marcus got 3 years probation for cooperation, spending most of it in rehab and therapy. Their assets vanished faster than ice cream at a summer picnic. The Scottsdale vacation home, investments, even Delilah's beloved BMW all liquidated for cleanup and compensation. The environmental restoration became an EPA Superfund success story and a permanent reminder that poisoning your own community always comes due. 6. Advanced filtration systems didn't just remove the copper contamination, they upgraded the entire water supply beyond its original standards. Dr. Foster's university research team turned the cave network into a living laboratory, developing purification methods that are now implemented nationwide. But the real change came from the people. The residents dismantled the authoritarian HOA and replaced it with something no one expected, the Willowbrook Environmental Cooperative. Instead of obsessing over covenants, they committed to conservation. Instead of fixating on property values, they invested in sustainability. Janet Powell became the first president, running unopposed on transparency, environmental stewardship, and genuine community collaboration. My fish farm didn't just recover. It exceeded every projection I'd ever dared to make. The Federal Victim Compensation Fund, combined with an unexpected insurance settlement, gave me the chance to build something bigger than a business, the Clearwater Conservation Foundation. The foundation now runs an environmental education center welcoming school groups, college researchers, and conservation professionals studying sustainable aquaculture. We host fishing clinics for disabled veterans, teaching skills that translate into therapy, income, and belonging. Every day, the scent of mountain air mixes with a sense of purpose I never thought I'd reclaim. Our proudest achievement is the annual Clearwater Festival, celebrating environmental restoration through community action. Last year, over 3,000 people attended, raising $85,000 for our Veteran Scholarship Fund. Kids who'd never seen sustainable farming learn ecosystem balance, while parents discover that environmental responsibility and economic growth aren't enemies. The scholarship program has already helped 12 veterans launch aquaculture operations across the Rocky Mountains. Billy Redstone expanded his guide service into full-scale environmental education tours. Even Tom and Sarah Tatum converted part of their ranch into a regenerative agriculture demonstration site. Willowbrook's property value fully rebounded within 2 years, driven not by HOA threats, but by national recognition for environmental leadership. Turns out positive headlines about successful restoration attract buyers far more effectively than mailbox regulations ever did. Dr. Foster established a permanent research station at Clearwater Lake, studying how communities recover from intentional environmental damage. Her published work is now required reading in environmental law programs nationwide, and she regularly testifies before Congress on community-led restoration. Emma Vasquez won a regional journalism award for her coverage of the case, and now writes a syndicated column on rural community issues. Her follow-up documentary, Poisoned Wells: How One Woman Destroyed Her Own Community, airs regularly on environmental networks as a cautionary tale about unchecked authority. Rebecca Torres earned promotion to Regional Wildlife Supervisor with expanded authority across 3 states. She credits the Willowbrook case with reshaping how federal agencies collaborate with local communities during environmental crises. Standing on my dock this morning, watching visitors learn sustainable fishing while children explore the education center, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before Afghanistan: peace with my purpose. The sound of laughter mixed with trout breaking the surface created a life soundtrack I once thought military injury had taken from me forever. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes a doorway to the best future you never imagined. Breathing clean mountain air reminds me daily that justice doesn't always arrive as punishment. Sometimes it shows up as healing, growth, and communities choosing cooperation over conflict. You know, Ezra spent 5 years building something meaningful on his land, and Delilah thought you could erase all of it with a midnight kayak and 40 pounds of copper sulfate. That's the thing about people like her. They fixate on what they hate instead of understanding how systems actually work. She knew that lake looked like a problem. What she didn't know was that her morning coffee came from it. She had authority. She had lawyers. She had the HOA. But Ezra had something she didn't: knowledge. He understood his land. He learned the geology. He took time to understand how the underground spring system really flowed. 6 weeks. That's how long it took for her own poison to reach her kitchen sink. 6 weeks of believing she'd won, while consequences moved silently toward her home underground. I've seen a lot of HOA stories, and there's always a moment when someone in power realizes they were operating on assumptions that were never true. Sometimes it's zoning law. Sometimes it's state regulation they never bothered to read. This time, it was basic geology. Have you ever dealt with an HOA president so focused on winning that they stopped paying attention to reality? Tell me what happened. And if you want more stories like this, hit subscribe. Because unfortunately, Delilah isn't the only board member who made decisions without understanding the consequences.